Excellent. Well, that's putting my feet to the fire, isn't it? So great to be up here. I'm really thrilled to be here because I've put a lot of effort into getting in front of you people. I appreciate the background, the skills, and what you're doing to develop your businesses. So I'm here to help you along the way. I'm very grateful to Mal and to Ian as well for accepting or inviting me to come along here. And it's great to be in Scarborough. My first business in Australia was in Scarborough. So it sort of takes me back. I was looking this morning out the window of the apartment I'm in, looking across, and I thought, wow, Rotto. Why on earth I left Perth 15 years ago, I don't know. I used to sail over to Rotto regularly, race in the Swan River, and I'm thinking, why did I leave? But who lives in WA here that sort of empathises with what I'm saying? Yeah, probably half of you, yeah. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is to basically run through a bit of a process to show you how you can get away from the daily grind by using the mechanics of franchising. I might just ask here, any of you franchisors at the moment, so you've got a franchise system, a couple of people, and what about franchisees? Anybody who's... Okay, so we just got very few people, 3 or 4, that are actually familiar with the concept of franchising. Okay, without any more ado, this was just me to say I'm, I'm thrilled to be here. So, excellent stuff. Now, what I'm going to do, Warren was the winner and the last time I presented in Sydney of the, here we go, somewhere here there's a Kindle. Oh yeah, here we go. So I'm offering a Kindle as a prize. If you fill in the quiz form and you get the quiz right, and I do check them, providing you fill in the details, I'll email the winners the information, so I need your email address and your physical address, and I'll post you a Kindle if you win in the draw. The 2 runners-up prizes, but by no means to be considered lightly, a copy of this book, The Top Franchise CEOs. There's 14 people in here that have written their stories that are really quite fascinating. And for anybody in business or whether you're interested in franchising or not, you find there's some great tips to pick up there. So that's the other couple of prizes. So just keep your eyes open as we go through. This is meant to keep you on your toes and listening to me. So all I'm here is to show you the way out of the door, basically, you know, from your business. This is the brief I was given by Ian, was to how to sack yourself. So let's get you out. So most of the people I know in business, quite frankly, are just frantic. There's always stuff happening. And the truth of the matter is, you really just don't feel you can let go. It's an emotional habit, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, all those sorts of things, you just can't let go. So what we're trying to do is to show you how you can do it, but give you the motivation by showing you really what you can achieve. So we'll just run through very quickly. Incidentally, how many people here have seen me present on franchising before? Not too many, okay. Look, you won't be seeing a repetition. What I'm showing you today is different. It's really going another step down the path. So hang in, bear with me if there's anything that you hear that you're familiar with, because most of the content will be quite different. So you're in a situation where I guess a few of you are a bit lost. You're trying to work your way through growing your business, improving situation, get yourself away from the daily grind. Might ask, who feels that they've run into roadblocks in business? Have you reached a stage where really you want to go further, but there are things that are just stopping you, whether it may be letting go and delegating? What I'd like you to do is just very quickly, just jog down 3 things that are stopping you from going on a holiday next week. All right? 3 things that are stopping you going on holiday next week. Be honest with yourself. The quickest things that come out of your head. And when you've got 3 things down, just put your hand up so I don't... no, you're taking your time. Anybody finished? Yes? All right? No? Okay, so put your hand up when you've got 3 things on your list. No? I take it you're not being honest with me. Okay, we'll move on. Okay, so look, the solutions are expensive. If you really want to get away from your business, you're faced with, trying to delegate, to leverage the business. The fact is there's a couple of options, but the way to get out of your business can be expensive. The way to grow your business can be expensive. If you want to replicate what you're doing and maybe open another branch, grow the business, expand, you've got to invest in stock, plant and equipment, maybe premises, and there's a high risk involved. You don't know the outcome. What you're doing at the moment is working great, but if you multiply it by 2, 3, 4, 5 times and invest a lot of money, probably significant sort of 6-figure chunks of money, are you going to be successful? Are you going to expose yourself and regret that you invested that extra working capital? What I'd like to do is to illustrate to you there is a much better way. This is Annette Corrie, or Nettie as her friends call her. Nettie is a young lady from the Gold Coast, and 3 years ago she was made redundant. She worked in the fashion industry, and she thought, what am I going to do? I'm fed up with this, unreliable sort of employment situation. She went to a friend's wedding on the Saturday, and it gave her an inspiration. I think I'll start a business organising weddings. How good's that? So she'd never been in business before. None of her family had been in business before. They all told her she had rocks in her head, and she started a business. So let's just share a few minutes of Nettie's story. What she'll do is tell you the first stage, and then she'll show you the next step. So it's the before and after of Nettie with her business, all about venues.
So I actually run 2 wedding companies. One of them is all about venues, and they're both based on the Gold Coast. So I guess one of the biggest benefits that franchising has given to me is the flexibility to do what I want. And I guess what my goals are, in life is just to be able to live that beach bum lifestyle and travel around the world when I want to, and not actually be tied down to a physical business. When particularly working weddings, you have to be really reliable, and you get phone calls all the time, and you have to return them within 24 hours. Otherwise, you have brides absolutely freaking out if you don't reply to emails or phone calls. So I guess when I first started my business, after a year, I felt really trapped in my business, because if I wasn't there, the business didn't go anywhere, and there would be a lot of breakdowns happening. So I guess for the first year, I took no holidays. I was run into the grounds, working 6 to 7 days a week, and there was many weekends I was calling my husband on the phone in tears, going, I can't handle it. There'll be all these different things happening in business, linen wouldn't turn up. And you need to deliver a wedding. You don't have time, you can't be late, everything has to be 100%. So we'd have lots of different breakdowns like that, and I was just trying to do it all by myself. I didn't have any staff, and it just wasn't a very good business model. And I worked that out quite quickly when I got to a point of I've had enough, I want to sell the business. So I went to the business broker, and he gave me a business valuation of about $30,000, and he said I'd be very lucky to even sell it for that much, because it was worth nothing. And it broke my heart, because I've been working my ass off, and he's just you've only been operating for a year. No one's going to buy a business that's been operating for a year, and you'll have a really difficult time selling it. I decided to franchise, so that was about 18 months ago. It took me 3 months to put the system together. I had a consultant actually talk me through it, which was amazing, because when you're trying to translate anything in franchising, you're like, what does that mean? So that really helped me. And I settled on my first franchise the very first month that my documents were ready from my solicitor. And I did this with no marketing. So I had a pre-sale during the 3 months. I was just telling people what I was doing, and I also shared with my staff as well. There was actually a staff member who was working for me 5 hours a week, only 5 hours a week, who actually bought the very first franchise. So that was pretty cool, literally selling a franchise as soon as it was ready. So, and now I have 5 franchisees. I actually settled on number 5 last night. So I was very, very excited. Yeah. And I guess the main reason, like, the great thing back to, like, my business broker who told me your business is worth nothing. You've only been operating for a year. You'll be lucky to get 30,000. And the main reason why I wanted to sell it in the first place was to have the lifestyle where I could travel, and the business didn't rely on me being there 100% of the time. And that's literally the life that I'm living now. Like last year, I went to, like, pretty much after every franchise sale, I go on a big overseas holiday. And like last year I went to Hawaii, and then I went to Bali twice, and then I went to Hawaii again in December, and then New York, and then the Bahamas. And then we've just come back from a full month in the States. So like in the States, like the whole time that I was away, I was like, there was a franchise being processed and my solicitor was looking after it. And I came back this week and the documents were already signed, and yesterday I signed them. So that's the kind of thing, like I still can't believe I'm just like, this year has probably been the biggest year for me to really translate from actively working for money to money just coming passively now. My company has a valuation of about 300,000. So I don't know anybody else who's actually, 10 times the value in 2 years. And there's certain things that I have done in the last 2 years that have given me that kind of valuation.
Well, she's not here, but who reckons that Nettie's done a great job? Quite fantastic, eh? She's at the point now where she's selling the whole group, so she's realising a six-figure sum for it, and she's starting another franchise group next year. At the beginning of next year, she's having a baby, so she's going to get the baby, then she's going to start her next franchise group. She's got it all laid out. So giving you an indication of her humble beginnings and her limited experience, you can see that it's doable, and it's not an uncommon situation. So just thought it was worth showing you that to give you an idea. So can you relate to yourselves and say, well, if that's where she was and that's what she did, what could I do if I used the tools and had the energy and enthusiasm and wanted to go on a holiday like Nettie? Because she doesn't stop going on holiday. That's what I love about Nettie. But our lawyer was brilliant. She mentioned she had a sale while she was away. She got back, and the next morning from arriving at the airport, she was in there signing the contracts and got a cheque. So great bit of teamwork. So there you go. But it's not just small business franchising. You know, who recognises this chap's face? Amazing, isn't it? He is one of WA's richest sons. In fact, he's probably the most wealthy private business owner in Australia. His name is Jack Cohen. He's a personal friend of our next speaker, who I'm privileged to be preceding, and he has just been nominated to the Fairfax board. So Jack Cohen was a Canadian. He came to Australia with his parents, went to Melbourne. They were from North America in the motor industry. He was here for a couple of years, went back, finished his studies and said, I'm going to go to Australia. He got some money rallied together in the family, and he bought the Kentucky Fried Chicken rights to Western Australia in 1972. In about 1974, he went to Burger King and bought the rights for Australia. They couldn't call it Burger King because somebody had the name registered, so they called it Hungry Jack's. Now, at this point in time, he's valued, as of the BRW magazine earlier this year, at $661 million. Not bad. And it's a private business. Most people don't realise it. Nobody I saw put their hands up and said they recognised him. It's amazing, under the radar. So you've got the contrast from Nettie with her little wedding business and Jack Cohen. Who's heard of the Sydney Harbour climb, the bridge climb? Who knows it's one of the biggest cash cows in Australia? Absolutely amazing. He owns 40%. Not a bad little sleeping investment. So it gives you an idea, plus racehorses and so on and so forth. And he's a director of Channel 10. So it just goes to show franchising has given him what he's got. So just an idea. Now, the asterisks are relevant. If you're interested in the quiz in a Kindle or a book, I might mention that when you see the asterisk, you want to take note. That's just a clue. So people will tell you that franchising is about documentation, number one. And they'll tell you it's about the product, number two. So that's predominantly what people will tell you if you talk to consultants, people in the traditional field. But the reality is it's a lot more than that. It's about changing your business. It's about hatching a new business, a new company. taking a new direction. And the analogy that I use is actually getting a couple of eagles up there soaring. A lot of people use the analogy flying like an eagle, you're soaring, you know, you're really successful, you're up there with the big picture. Well, what you're going to do is create two. One business is the franchisee business, and one is the franchisor business. So that's metamorphosed. I never get that word right. Better get Mal up here. So you need to have two visions. And the wonderful thing about this is it's not making your business more complicated, which is what you would do if you're expanding it. It's actually taking the simplest common denominator of your business, breaking it right down. And Simon would just loves this stuff because it coordinates him with his systems. And Albert Einstein loves it as well, because one of his famous phrases that I love is, you should make everything as simple as it could be, but not too simple. And that's as much as it needs to be. So rather than doing vast amounts of documentation and making things complicated, just look at the single, simplest common denominator in your business, and that's the tool you're going to use. So let's run through. If you've seen my presentation before, one of the people I refer to is John O'Brien. John from Poolworks. This is his model. When in 1996 in Hornsby in northern Sydney, he bought this business. There was a warehouse and 3 vans. They were doing swimming pool maintenance, repairs, replacements of pumps and all that sort of thing. Pretty straightforward. John had been in franchising for a number of years. He'd actually been a home delivery driver with Crystal soft drinks for Schweppes, delivering, you know, Schweppes, Coca-Cola, that sort of stuff, or their appropriate brand. And this is what he bought, was this model. There was a warehouse there and the 3 vans. What his picture was, because he worked out before he started what his structure was he wanted, was that he wanted to actually take that business, convert the warehouse into a retail hub, and each retail hub had 6 or 7 vans underneath, so they were sub-franchised. And that's where they collected their stock and their equipment and got all their orders and so forth. And in essence, what he's done is take that to the point now where he's got 65 hubs around Australia, 65 retail hubs, and 300 vans. So he's achieved something quite extraordinary, but with the simplest of simple models, but he knew just where he was starting. And he bought that business with that in mind. A very quick snapshot of me. Who am I? What right do I have to stand here and tell you about all these examples? And have I got any authority? Well, I'll leave you to judge that, but let me just give you a bit of background. I was born in London. This was just down the road from me. Bombs fell, and that's where we played as kids. I went to study as a quantity surveyor, so I went to college, wanted to travel, ended up moving to Italy. That's the fountains of Trevi. That's right, comes back. I spent many an hour there throwing coins in the fountain. Very, very, very glamorous, romantic. Then I went to live in Africa. I lived in Malawi, a country in the middle of Central Africa, landlocked, fairly small, in those days a population of 5 million people. I started a building construction business. I also had a transport business, an import business, and a swimming pool construction business. But in 1975, after having met my wife Prue there, we married, a couple of small children. We knew that Africa wasn't the long term for us. There's just too many issues and uncertainties. Much as I loved it, wonderful time I had there. This is us arriving in Fremantle in August 1975. Me with my high heels. I think I had a perm, certainly had a bit of a beard. So yeah, there you go, look at that and think, who's that? And the girls are living around the world. So, but I went into building here, started constructing, and I was building, developing units and apartments in Mosman Park, Cottesloe. My business just started up the road here in Scarborough Beach Road called Brian Keane Homes. I was in Mal Dempsey's office. He was a real estate agent then. I don't know whether he's still there. And I won the Home Builder of the Year on one occasion. And then in 1982, kabang, interest rates were 21.5%. So forget the half, there was 21 reasons why I needed to get out of building. I had property and I couldn't sell it. So I thought, career change. So after 20 years in the building industry, I went looking. I thought, what can I find? I looked at buying a few taxis, I looked at delicatessens and all sorts of things. Anything but the building industry, because it was a bit tainted in my eyes at that stage. And I ended up, well, I retained a business broker, Jim Goodwin, probably one of the best business brokers Australia's ever seen. And he came to me with all sorts of opportunities. And he bought me a set of accounts, and I said, Jim, I don't want a franchise. Why should I pay somebody else 2, 3, 5, 10%? Well, I know I can run a business, providing interest rates aren't 21.5%. And he whited it out. In those days, it was white out. And the figures he showed me were brilliant. And it was a bed shed in Claremont. In those days, bed shed had just started, and I was the 4th and 5th franchisee. Well, over the next 5 years, I owned 7. So I became a multi-store franchisee, but I got enough of the 4 walls, and I started helping people buy and sell franchises in the way I had, pretty much as a broker, if you like. And then a little bit down the track, people were saying, well, can you help me convert my business to a franchise? So I joined with a partner, John Allison. We created the Franchise Alliance, which was a consulting and broking business. And we established ourselves in St George's Terrace, next door to the Langley Hotel, I think it changed its name to. And we got up and running. We're joined by a third partner. And basically, we were then approaching companies in the eastern states to come over here. So we contacted Jim in Melbourne. He was developing a reputation at that stage. So we said, Jim, why don't you come to WA? So we found his state franchisor for him. We brought him over here on a trip for a couple of days, running up and down the Hay Street Mall on his motorised mower, and we got his first 10 or 15 franchisees up and running. The rest is history. You know, people told me when I was a very avid rugby player at Cottesloe Rugby Club, and a couple of the guys in the team were lawn mowing contractors, and they said, Brian, you must be daft. No one's going to buy a franchise. You know, we go out and earn $300 or $400 a week, cash, whatever it was in those days. Well, he gave a guarantee of $500, and within 18 months, there were 70 or 80 franchises. And the rest is history, isn't it? He's got 25 groups and 2,900 franchisees. We learned so much from people like Jim that we saw that Jim was actually able to leave his lawn mowing behind and really live the life of an entrepreneur, which indeed he's taken to the full. We also helped Eagle Boys come here. Tom Potter, he started off in rural New South Wales at 27, and what he would do would go to a town, knock on the door of the 4 pizza shops and say, I'm coming to town, I'll give you an opportunity to make a pitch if you want to join our group, because someone's going to. So he'd generally get the best one. And we helped him set up here and got up and running and so forth. We also did the same with Brumbies, Ultratune, and numerous others. So we thought, well, we've got all these clients here, we need to get a bit bigger. So we had clients who were resident in the eastern states, but we couldn't service their needs. They said, can you help us sell our franchises? So we franchised our business, and we opened offices in Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, and Auckland, which were franchised. So we were carrying the letter of the law, if you like, of franchising. And we were, at that stage, really getting a good handle. We've been privileged to see lots of systems, lots of different people, the way they work. So pulling out this simple process was something we did all the time. And we thought, well, we knew there were holes in the market. Early 90s, there was a little bit of a recession, and there were people pouring out of Telstra and the banks and government departments, you know, redundancies, with decent amounts of income. But they were white collar. They didn't necessarily want to push a lawnmower around. So we said, let's get some white collar franchises, and we thought, well, let's start our own. And I'll just play you another quick clip. This is John Allison, the chairman of Expense Reduction Analysts. This started in Perth, and what John's going to do is just mention to you where it is today. It started off with an idea of finding a business that you can sell, a franchise you can sell to people that want to work from home, and basically a management, you know, senior executives and so forth.
Hi there, I'm John Allison, the retired chairman of Expense Reduction Analysts UK. Brian Keane has asked me to give a testimonial, and I'm more than happy to do that. When we started our franchise back in Perth in 1992, all we actually started with was a name and a concept that we got from the USA. Brian worked really closely with us to help us get established as a franchisor way back then across Australia and New Zealand. It wasn't long, in fact, before we'd grown to be the largest white-collar franchise across both countries, with 80 franchisees up and running. Today, obviously, after drawing on Brian's experience, our company has grown. Expense Reduction Analysts now operates in more than 27 countries around the globe. And whilst I'm retired now, which is why I'm dressed like this, our UK company enjoys a turnover well in excess of 20 million Australian dollars, and it's still growing successfully today despite my retirement. So if you're seeking some help in franchising, if you're looking to try and find the person in Australia who knows more about franchising, then you're going to have to take my word for it that Brian Keane is your man. If I wanted help with franchising today, Brian's the guy I'd go and see. He's got the ethic, both the work ethic and the knowledge and skill to help most people carry their company in the franchise environment to be a huge success. I wish you every success with yours.
So John lives quite an idyllic lifestyle. A couple of years ago I was lucky enough to be invited to go and join him on his 42-footer sailing around Mallorca, so no complaints at all. But what he's achieved there is an enormous organisation. Started here. In fact, we sold the licences for expense reduction analysts around the country before we'd even put pen to paper and actually done any work for any clients. So just the concept and the opportunity of being involved, people were breaking their necks for. And we got six-figure sums for every state. So it's amazing what you can do. So you can see John, he's been shown the exit. The other businesses that we started, so there was one called Press for Time, which was a home service or pick-up dry cleaning, Ken Clean window cleaning group, the Franchise Alliance I mentioned, Columbo's Frozen Yogurt, we got the distributorship and opened some retail stores, and Leasehold Analysis, which before the days of the Rental Tenancy Acts or Retail Tenancy Acts, landlords infamously always overcharged or overmeasured the number of square metres, so we used to go around and check all that sort of stuff. So that's a bit of an idea, this sort of thing. Moved over to the Eastern States, followed my wife. She got a career opportunity she couldn't say no to, and working with Robert Hill at the EPA up on the Barrier Reef, and I ended up retiring about 5 years ago to a place called Nambucca Heads near Coffs Harbour. Beautiful, lonely beaches, absolutely wonderful, grandchildren nearby. And I wanted to do something, I needed to get moving. I had a great passion for Malawi, and so I founded Microloan Foundation. You've probably heard of microfinance, where you provide loans to women in Africa, in this case, to start their own business. So they get $70 loans, they pay it back in 4 months, and they start a business, which might be repairing shoes, it might be growing tomatoes, it may be brewing home beer, it doesn't matter. At this point, we actually started operating in a place called Melange there 3 years ago, and up till the end of June, we'd provided nearly 7,000 loans in that region, affecting about 30,000 people, because there's an average of 6 children per family. So this was something I had a real passion for, but I didn't have the funding to drive it in the way I wanted to. And it's hard work. Setting up a charity is a lot harder than setting up and running a business, I can tell you. So I thought, well, I need to do a bit more to get it working. And I was getting, well, Neil was saying yesterday, if you retire after 18 months, you sort of lost your drive and your energy. Well, I was conscious of that. I really was. So, and my wife as well, she got similar sort of, I suppose, in her veins, ambition. So I said, well, what are we going to do? What's the next step? And I thought, well, came across the concept of internet marketing and the sorts of venues like the events you're seeing here. And I thought, well, I've been in franchising for 30 years. I've got an absolute passion for it. Why don't I teach people about it? Because I think there's a big gap in the market. There's a huge opportunity for franchising that's not being taken. So I went and spoke to John O'Brien. I think, my mic's still there. And I spoke to him about my concept of what I call micro franchises. So very small franchises, starting off very simply and very inexpensively, that anybody can do. And this is what he responded with, which gave me, reinforced my ambition, I suppose, from the point of view of getting up and running. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to read through that. So you've probably done that. Okay, so what I want to show you is the world that's out there in franchising. It's quite extraordinary. Aha. We've got this glitch again. Can you just move me forward a slide manually, or who's getting there? All right. I better add a little bit and tell you that. Okay. So what I did, I put together what I call my 7 steps, which are really, I suppose, were our Bible from the point of view of creating a franchise business from what we'd learned. And The 7 steps are learning about franchising. This is what you need to do if you want to franchise your business. So if you're going to go out and franchise, doesn't matter how and who you do it with or whatever, these are the key steps I think you need to follow. Learn about franchising. Learn about it first, you know. Do a feasibility study. Make sure that franchising is going to be right for you and your business. Then you've got to build the franchise businesses, the 2 businesses that I see, the franchisor and the franchisee. You've got to construct the model. Then you've got to get your business converted and up and running. And then you've got to establish a pilot so you can pressure test it and make sure it all works, and you've got something to show your prospective franchisees later on. Then you recruit your franchisees. Then you're on into the big picture and you can show yourself the door once you've grown that business enough to be able to sustain the payment of staff and so forth. So that's the basic process. So I haven't got time to go through all those steps, so I'll give you very quickly some of the key steps, I suppose. And I'll start on, what I'll do is go through step 3, which is build the franchise business. And I've picked 4 areas there, which I'm just going to run through with you very quickly. Franchisee support systems, or delegations, the key you're getting there, marketing territories, money and budgets. And you notice what I'm covering here really is complementary to what Neil was saying yesterday about leadership, what Ian was saying earlier about team building, what Simon was saying about systems, and what Street Smart preach really about marketing. It all dovetails into this model. So delegation. I might mention money flow's got an asterisk next to it and it's got an underline. So if you're thinking about some of the main areas where franchisors make serious mistakes, that might be worth thinking about. And then also there's marketing, is another area where people make serious mistakes. And you'll have heard Mal talking about that, no doubt. So there's a system to delegate. You've seen a lot of this information today and yesterday, so I shan't spend particular time on it. But the fact is, we all know it's not as easy to do it as you would believe, unless you've got the discipline and you've got that external influence pushing you out of your comfort zone. And this is where having 2 businesses makes it so much easier, because you construct the models very simply from very basic stuff. And it's the same as Simon was saying. You start with a minimum to get the ball rolling, and you add to it as you go. So it's just checklists and processes. And then what you're basically doing is creating a situation where your primary role is becoming an entrepreneur. That's the franchisor side of the business. The franchisee is doing all the things that you're trapped with at the moment, being the technician, being the manager, overcoming that capability trap that you've got. That actually is the franchisee's task. He's stuck in what was your capability trap. Mowing the lawns in Jim's case, for example. That's all his franchisees used to do. They didn't get business, they didn't give quotes. All they did was get a message on the pager, go to 53 Smith Street at 3:15, $30. And that was it. So he had them doing basically what was his limiting factor. But you do need to become, if you're not, a leader, which means getting people to follow you. And my lawyer, Ivan Paul, uses the knife in the corner there. He's a Kiwi, he's a bit dangerous in company. But he says you've got to rub their chest in sort of warm satisfaction and have your knife in their back to make sure they respond and do things you want. So it's the sort of compliance thing. Not everyone finds that funny, but there you go. An example here was we franchised in the early 90s Ordermasters. Peter Bassich was the owner at that stage. He'd established a business about 7 years earlier, had 7 outlets. But he was fed up with being bogged down with the day-to-day, wanted to grow and couldn't. So we went through the franchise system with him, and lo and behold, he franchised. He's now got about 35 franchises, but what he actually did, his goal was to sell the business, and he ended up selling it to franchisees. So that's a great exit strategy. But what happened and what amazed him was that one of his managers bought a franchise. And it was only within 6 months that suddenly that store was turning over 30% more than it had ever done before as the top performing store in the group. And I never forget Peter's face when I went into his office, and he was just absolutely furious. Why didn't that do that for me? And that just really clearly shows one of the big aspects about franchising. They've got skin in the game, they're motivated. And Peter showed himself the exit. So you've got to use science. Disc profiles and so forth, you're perhaps familiar with, but you've got to make sure you're choosing the right sort of people. If you're an entrepreneur, you're probably a D. You're someone who wants to dominate, direct, and so on. You don't want a business full of Ds. So you want to make sure you get people that are complementary. Something I will just touch on very quickly, I'm an absolute discipline and fan of a fellow called Greg Nathan. He was a franchisee with Brumbies in Victoria. He became their state franchisor, then became the national sales manager, got out of franchising and go to uni and study psychology. And he learnt a pattern in human behaviour, and he found it applied to franchising. And it's like this. You buy a franchise, and you can relate this to anything in life, and you say, wow, it's fantastic. The franchisee is wonderful, he's marvellous, he's incredible, this marvellous system, he can't put a foot wrong. And then after about 3 to 6 months, you come down there and you say, actually, it's me that's doing all the work. He's up there in his office, driving his Merc, whatever it is. And then you get the bottom dip here where you say, why should I be paying fees? In fact, why should I even be involved? I can do it myself. A bed shed, don't tell anybody, but we had our own name registered, ready to break away, because we were exactly at that point. We were just self-motivation, I suppose, and the fact that they had contracts with Joyce, who were our suppliers, meant we stayed in bedshed. But what happened was we learned that there was mutual benefit in being together. So you can probably just relate to that in lots of circumstances. In fact, think of personal relationships. You know, think of someone you met at some stage, you said, wow, this is brilliant, this is the person for me. And then after a little while you thought, don't know, not really pulling their weight, not quite what I thought it was. And then either you resolve it and you work out how partnerships work, or you go your different ways. And this is exactly the same. So when you're looking at your, retaining your franchisees, you've got to make sure you've got appropriate people to fill the gaps. And you've got to make sure that your delegation process is one that's matched with good consultation. And that is so critically important. So many systems are destroyed because the franchisors just don't understand good communication and don't treat their franchisees with respect and develop trust, which is an absolutely critical part of the whole process. You'd all see MasterChef. I like a bit of cooking, but I'm not really a big TV fan. But last week I was watching their cook-off with all their winners. So they got the winners of the last 4 years or something like that. And it struck me, I thought, well, I did see one of the first ones that came on about 3 or 4 years ago. And they were good cooks, but they weren't particularly skilled. And I look at them now, and there's 2 or 3 of them got restaurants, 2 of them have got television programs, 2 or 3 of them have written books. Do you think they just learned that overnight? It was incremental. So while they were in those kitchens and they were learning, cooking amongst each other, being sort of mentored by those chefs, they've actually incrementally learned the skills. And it's the same if you look at delegation, you look at any aspect of change, there's an incremental process that's involved. And it's something I think is an excellent point to remember. Money flow. You've got to make sure that the money flow in a franchise, as the second key, really is handled properly. It often isn't. It's important to understand your franchisees who create your income, and you're going to spend a lot of it in expenses, but you want to make sure that you're going to feel you're getting value for money. So there's a circle, basically, where you've got the franchisor over here providing service fees and royalties, the franchisee's getting expenses, he's making profit, he's paying that through to the franchisor, he's got some profit and so forth. So it's going round and round in a circle. And you've got to make sure you've got the budgets right and so forth. So many businesses get strangled because they don't understand the elements of franchising and the quite dramatically different, I suppose, phases of cash flow that the business goes through. One example of a business, I think it's re-emerged these days, was called Red Spot Couriers in Perth. They were one of the founders of the Franchise Association back in the mid-80s. They sold a number of franchises and then there were no more territories to sell, but they weren't getting in, they hadn't constructed their financial budgets accurately enough. They weren't getting enough cash flow, enough revenue from their franchise fees. So they stopped providing support, the franchisees got fed up, and you ended up with an implosion. It just fell apart. If they'd done their homework and they'd understood what was going to happen, they would have planned for that beforehand. So a lot of groups depend on sales of franchises, not on the cash flow from the established group. So it's a big mistake people make. Another area that's critically important is territories. This is where you make your money. The replication of the business, just at the stroke of a pen, you can perhaps add 30, 50% to the number of franchises you can sell, and all it is a matter of very simple replication. So you've got to make sure you get a strategy right. There's so many organisations that miss the boat at the beginning. It's interesting to see how these things evolve. Subway are a great model. Subway is now the largest franchise group in the world. They've got more outlets than McDonald's. Absolutely enormous. And they make a sandwich. And if you go in their shops and have a look, they're not particularly fancy, but they use a process that we call the Olympic rings. They open ones, when they opened their first store, it's called Pete Subs. Fred DeLuca was a student, funding his way through uni, borrowed some money from a family friend, opened a sandwich shop. After a year, the $1,000 he started off with had diminished to 70. And they decided the only way to go was to open a second store. Brave step. Right? Subway may never have evolved. And they opened the second store, not bad, but still struggling. So they said, well, let's open a third. But what they did, each time they overlapped the territories. So the brand had a certain awareness. Can you see the common sense in that? It meant that they weren't in new areas really with a name that was unknown. And they changed the name to Subway, and it took off. When they came to Australia, they sold the rights, and they opened one in Perth, one in Melbourne, one in Sydney, one in Brisbane, went belly up. They just hadn't followed the formula. So if we look at John O'Brien again, you can see how he used that system, that process, and I mentioned is now significant size. So a very quick exercise for you. If you were establishing your business as a franchise, let's say in Perth, how many franchises do you reckon you could have? Just write down off the top of your head what you think, just very quickly. Just take 15 seconds to write down how many franchises, if you want to franchise your business, you could replicate with. Right, get a bit of an idea. Then you just think, well, extrapolate that to Western Australia. So you may say in Perth you could have 5, in Western Australia maybe it's 15, in Australia it may be that it's 80. Well, that's the sort of figure you might be looking at as an example. Well, I'll show you some of the key areas you need to look at to make sure you do that science properly. You need to look at the nature of the business. Is it a fixed business? Is it a mobile? Will it work from home? These are factors people ignore how it impacts on the calculations of your territories. Is it a business that deals with business to business, or is it a business that deals with the general public? What sort of size of population do you need to support your particular franchise? People make a stab at it. A bedshed, we used a figure of about 25,000 because it happened to be what the local free newspapers were. And it actually worked really well. But then we found that actually you could get a business up and running with 10 or 12,000. So there were some nasty disputes about territories. So basically when you're working through your demographics and building your territories, you're using the information you create in your marketing strategy, what Mal calls your avatar. That is what you're using to define the density of the market you can create. Maybe you're looking at a business where home ownership is relevant. You know, if you're providing business services, or maybe additions or renovations, it's quite different if you're looking at homeowner business, privately owned houses, owner-occupiers, as opposed to tenanted houses which are owned by investors, because their demands are different. One just wants to fix it, one wants to improve it. So those are the things you've got to look at. And you've got to consider what's going to happen in 5 years' time when your business is developed and you can actually sustain a lot more franchises in the territory than you've perhaps allowed for. It can be very, very difficult. There was a group that moved over here from Melbourne, and they were delivering water, and they sold one franchise to cover the whole of Perth. Within 6 months, that fellow was so busy that they could have had 10. But he had a franchise agreement which gave him the whole territory, and he wouldn't budge. At the end of the day, the only solution was to buy him out for a huge amount of money. That was just because they hadn't thought it through to the potential. So you've got to balance it. The other point is, do you want to be near competition or not? These are elements to consider when you think about franchising. I'm one that relishes being near the competition. I was taught that as a 13-year-old when I was working in retail in London, and also when I was working at Bedshed. We learnt to piggyback off the competition. If there's a couple of bedding shops in Morley, whack, go and get next door to them. That's the principle. And Derek Pint passed away some years ago now, but his philosophy was very interesting. He wasn't a franchisor. He couldn't sell a bed. We wouldn't let him in the shops. He was a property developer. What he did was find sites, convert them into a retail outlet, and then put a franchise in there. So he had a ready-made investment portfolio. So there's lots and lots of mechanisms you can use. Very quickly, a bit of an idea, if you're looking, for example, I'll use one here of house cleaning. If you need 5,000 households in a high-income area, maybe one of the coastal suburbs, you might need 5,000 households to get 30 regular customers. You may say that's a unit. If it's a low-income area, out in the lower socio-economic areas, you may need 5,000 households only give you 10 regular customers. So what you've got to do is balance it by making the territories perhaps larger in the lower socio-economic areas than you do in the higher ones. So in Peppy Grove, you'd have a very small territory. In Armidale, you may have a big one. So it gives you a bit of an idea. So giving you a bit of a hint here as far as the relationship between territories and marketing is concerned. And that marketing is the foundation of the business. That's what you need before you even start. And not to be confused with advertising. A lot of people think marketing is advertising. That's just the channel you use to get the marketing message out there. So you need to stress the fact that with marketing, you've got your basic marketing plan you develop from your strategy and your advertising plan. But then when you look at franchising, you look at the marketing strategy for franchisee recruitment. So you're looking at another parallel product line, and then you develop the advertising plan there. Important that you've got matching appearance in your franchises as well, of course. So working through that, the whole point is with a brand, I've always envisioned it as a parcelled box. Everything's there. So everything's contained in there, and that's your brand. That's the integrity of what you have and what you need to keep. And it never stops. You know, you need to keep refreshing that continually. Michael Sherlock, I don't know if anybody ever heard of him, but he was the guy behind Brumbies. They started off in Melbourne as orange people. They went virtually broke. He bought the shares in 1986 for $0.01 each and sold them 2006 for $3.60 and made 46 million. He was a marketing guru, but came from not from a marketing background. He refreshed their brand every 5 years. You can see the sequence, you can still recognise it, but every 5 years he refreshed it. And he came up with lots of new ideas. So you've got to make sure that what you've got, the way you market and advertise, is synonymous with the product. There's one example. And you need to do budgets. Don't just do it, you know, by the fly. The other thing is, if you're going to get into franchising, don't try and hide stuff. It's very important to be open, to have a situation of trust. So you don't take secret commissions and you don't take handbacks from suppliers. You put that into the fund, you disclose it, you make your profits legitimately. And this is just an outline here from the point of view of when you're doing your recruitment. You need to take into account this DISC profile again, or whatever process you use to make sure that you're getting the right sort of people. But what you do is you look at your strategy, you don't touch the brand itself, and you create the advertising plan. But keep it simple. So, to give yourself the sack, you've got to develop 2 businesses. But it's simple and it's fun. And in doing that, you need to really, I suppose, move away so that you're going to leverage. That's the biggest challenge, as we've been hearing for the last couple of days. Now, I haven't touched on documentation, I haven't touched on organisation and those sorts of things. There's much, much more. I'm giving you a quick potted idea, I suppose. But what I'd like to do is just move through quickly and say a couple of questions that I get asked. Number one is, how old does my business have to be? How many years do I need to be established? The answer is, whatever you like. We've established brilliant businesses with concept and others that have been running for 15 or 20 years. So the answer to that is whatever. And what are your franchises worth? It's interesting, people think there's a formula, there's a fixed figure. The average franchise fee is $80,000, but it could be zero, it could be $500,000. And all these things are flexible and variable. And when's the right time? Well, budget figures are looking brilliant in this country. On Friday, Glenn Stevens, the Governor of the Reserve Bank, announced that 3.75% was our growth of GDP. The situation is brilliant. And the other of the 3 Bs is that when things get tight, and it's notionally, mentally in a lot of cases, some aspects of business are doing it tough, but not all by any means. The fact is people rely on brands. They like the continuity and the comfort of brands. And then the third one is when people are looking to buy a business, particularly the sorts of people who come out of corporate and other backgrounds, they like the security of having a franchise business because it's got they feel the reliability. Give you an idea, I had a workshop last weekend on the Gold Coast. 2 of my clients had their best months ever, and they've had a best month ever every month this year. Been breaking record after record, and they weren't the only ones. And I've spoken to people here the last couple of days in similar situations. So there's lots of people doing really well. So Nettie, as I say now, is just selling her franchise group, netting a very significant amount of money, and moving on. So that's her little story. You could follow the trail and be there. So what I'd like to do, you've got a form on the table there, which is called "Is My Business Suited to Franchising?" If you'd like to take that, it's a very quick checklist. Don't spend a lot of time on it. Go down there and just answer the question. So the first one is, does the business have a proven cash flow and profitability, or are you at the idea phase? So just tick yes or no, and go down and do the other items, and we'll just do a quick add up at the end. So you've docked me 5 points. Just a very quick exercise. All right, and when you finish that, just go down and add up how many yeses you've got, and just write it in the appropriate box there. So if you score 1 to 5, 5 to 7, 8 to 10. Could we have a microphone, please? What I'd like to do is ask someone who's filled the form in to volunteer, just so we can very quickly have a quick run through and just discuss their situation and maybe just share some thoughts. Anybody happy to do that, to volunteer? Got a hand up over here? Thanks very much indeed. Oh, that's Paul. Here we go. All right, don't share, or feel compelled to share any confidential information, but okay, running through that checklist there, perhaps you can just tell us which boxes you've ticked, or sorry, which ones you put a cross on to put no.
Okay. Should be there to go, yep.
Yep, fine away.
There's really only 2 boxes that we ticked no on, and that was, had we had any franchise inquiries? Having said that, many of our clients have said that we should establish franchises to serve them better in other areas.
Right.
And whether or not we have the necessary capital, and we more than likely do, but it's something that really needs to be put down to greater assessment and feasibility first.
Right, okay, well that's a brilliant result, so from that point of view it's probably worth looking a bit further. I'll often get people who get 5 or 6, and the reality is they've just got work to do. If it's a concept business, it may be a brilliant concept, but you can't say you've got a proven cash flow. So just bear that in mind. It doesn't rule you out, so it's something you can use as a bit of a guideline. Okay, just quickly moving on. Does anybody have any questions about that little exercise? I've done it fairly quickly, but you got a grasp of it? Anyone got a question about their own business and whether or not it's valid? No? Okay, fine. Okay, so what I've endeavoured to do is show you a process which is an exit strategy for you and your business. So if you really want to get up there and achieve that and create those 2 businesses, franchising is perhaps something to look at. And basically, leaving the daily grind behind is what we're talking about. What I'd like to show you very quickly are 2 Street Smart members that have joined my programs, give you an idea of what their comments are.
Hi, my name's Andrew Nichols. I'm a licensed builder based in Brisbane. I actually have a franchise business. I have one franchisee that I started about 14 months ago, so I have had a little bit of experience with franchising as a system, although the way I got into it was not the ideal way, let's say. I just want to say, having just finished this workshop with Brian Keane for the weekend, that I can honestly say that in the last weekend I've learnt more about franchising than what I've ever known all my life, and I've been a self-employed business owner and contractor all my life. So I really want to thank Brian very much for taking the time to run this workshop. It has been really enlightening. It's opened my eyes. It's given me a great deal of confidence now moving forward that the franchise system that we've been thinking about, obviously we've learned some things to tweak it, but given us a lot of confidence, and I really want to thank him for sharing the information he has, and I'm looking forward to working with him down the track, because as far as I'm concerned, and I've spent a great deal of time and money looking, I simply haven't been able to find anyone of Brian's calibre and his team, the solicitors and accountants and so on, the people that he's put together to help us at such a very affordable and manageable rate. So I really want to thank him, and I would encourage anyone that's considering franchising as a business model, you simply have to talk to Brian. He's the man. Thank you.
Andrew was kicking himself because he'd spent a fortune on a lot of things he didn't need to spend money on, which is a great shame. The other one I'll show you is Ron Taylor. Ron's not here because he just had a hip operation, but he's a regular attendee at Street Smart. And he had a concept. I think he scored 6 on his sheet. I'll just quickly mention to you, or show you what Ron has to say.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Ron Taylor, Managing Director of a number of companies. I recently attended Brian Keane's How to Franchise Simply workshop to see if franchising was right for one of my businesses. Information supplied and the franchising industry contacts presented at that workshop convinced me that Brian's 30+ years within the industry was a valuable resource to tap into. I've since found that his course content is outstanding and his personal support exceptional, putting How to Franchise Simply a step above most in the information dissemination industry. If your business needs to move to the next step of being franchised, I'd certainly recommend that you contact Brian or attend one of his workshops now.
Okay, so that was Ron. So if you're at the point where you're thinking with your business, which direction you're going to go, are you going to stay the way you are you going to expand and invest more money in it, or maybe franchise? The truth is you can hide your head in the sand and just carry on the way you are. But if you do want to really make a step and change, bear in mind you've got to put some work in. Nettie, we heard from, it took her 3 months. Ron's probably taking 5 or 6 months. And Annie, one of my clients, is doing it in 3. She's the cupcake shop. So you need to allow yourself time. Some people may need 12 months or 24 months. But it can be all a bit mind-blowing. You look at what's involved and you go, where do I go next? What's my next step? What I'm suggesting is, I look at my experience as being rather like the black box. You know, over the years, I've picked up a lot of experience. We've had some ups and downs, and we've had some turbulent weather, and those are the things that I could sort of remember to share with people. So I'm offering myself as the jumbo pilot to train you. You can have somebody who's been a passenger or written the manuals to train you, but the reality is I'm offering myself to you as a pilot that's flown there and been through the storms. So everything I do is based on the steps. So whichever way you want to go, if you're looking to franchise your business, you really need to determine whether it suits you or not. And frankly, I don't know whether franchising suits you at this stage of the game. Can't really tell. So what I'm doing on Saturday is running a workshop here, which is for people that want to find out really whether franchising will suit them. It's the opportunity to see how you can grow your business tenfold in a 3-year period like Nettie, and really just show you the mechanics of franchising, making it very simple. We'll outline whether you need a franchise or a license. We'll run through the reasons why franchising is attractive and how to avoid the biggest mistakes that people make. And then also how you can do it without it costing you an arm and a leg. Critically important. You can do it on a shoestring. And then from there, also running through all the bits and pieces. So it's a very intense day. The total value of that workshop is $397, but I'm offering it to Street Smart members today for $97, and we'll be here eating and drinking with the same standard you've enjoyed the last few days. And if for a couple's come, you'll get a $50 cash refund. So, whoops. But also I'll be providing for anyone that comes one loan to Microloan Foundation, so that you know you're also assisting one family in Malawi to help themselves lift themselves from poverty. The quiz, don't forget to hand the forms in. So you've got the answers to the quiz, you've got the chance to win the Kindle or the books. If you want to catch up on Saturday, have a chat, look at my programs, or pick up some microloan flyers, they're all up there. So essentially, that's my presentation. Thanks for the opportunity you're giving it to you.
G'day, Brian.
Oh.